Welcome to this ChannelX Live Masterclass, based around our 50 new marketplaces you should be selling on ebook. And I'm delighted to be joined today by Dex from ChannelEngine. So welcome, Dex. How are you?
Oh, good. Thank you, Chris. Thank you also for being here, of course.
So really excited about the ebook to actually bring it to life in this session today. And just to prepare you, we're going to be covering a number of topics. We're going to look at some of the international marketplaces and the verticals they operate on, domestic marketplaces that you should be considering outside the big two of eBay and Amazon, because we're going to kind of assume that most people are on those marketplaces already. Yep. Look at the rise of retailer-led marketplaces. And then we're going to go on to things like we've got a great case study to talk about a retailer that has already branched out onto many of the marketplaces that are in the ebook. And we'll also wait until the end because we'll give you a link to exclusively download the 50 new marketplaces ebook for free at the end. So hang on for that. But welcome, Dex. I'm here in the UK. Where are you today, Dex?
Yeah, I'm actually in the Netherlands. So our headquarters is in the beautiful city of Leiden. Maybe not well known to everyone, but that's where I'm usually at if I'm not visiting the UK for the different events that we're doing.
So this is already an international masterclass. Just we're doing it from different countries. But let's talk about international marketplaces and some of the marketplaces that you can find in the ebook. So let's talk about fashion first of all. Which are some of the sort of standout fashion marketplaces that should be aware of, and what makes them special?
Yeah. I mean, especially on that fashion vertical, right? We see a lot of things happening within the space here. There's some of the noteworthy ones, I would say, are at least Zalando or About You when it comes to their coverage with multiple countries. Of course, they've already been there for a long time and established their marketplace business for a long time. But we definitely see a lot of things popping up when it comes to new marketplace business models, ASOS being one of them, of course, but mainly also for a lot of consumers that are currently looking at premium off-price items. Secret sales is one of the highlights that we do see in the 50 new marketplaces for this year. Especially, of course, in the secret sales vertical, where you get a lot of amazing brands for good value, where, in times like these, a lot of people are looking for.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting because we've already covered just in those few names a variety of different types of marketplaces. So we've got secret sales, which is more of a traditional type marketplace, and then we've got Zalando and ASOS, which are retailer-led marketplaces. So although we're talking international, we're already covering the full spectrum. But let's move on because not everyone's a fashion retailer. So let's look at a couple of other categories. Beauty, for example. There's a ton of people that sell everything from lipsticks to shaving supplies to makeup. What are some of the standout beauty supply marketplaces today?
Yeah, and it's quite funny because for some, as you said with Zalando, for instance, they're also in that beauty space, or at least they're trying to penetrate that in a way. But we definitely see a lot of retailer-led marketplaces in this space, right? So if we're looking at Boots, for instance, but also looking at Douglas throughout Europe, mainly Germany, Sephora being one of them, of course, opening up that marketplace model, which is, I think, incredible because you see that the traction and also the dominance that they have on high street are actually, it's actually translated into that marketplace model with who, they're actually letting on the platform and how curated they are. And everything that comes with that in terms of benefits.
So I think most people are familiar with Boots, although they may not have known they're now a marketplace, and probably Sephora and Zalando as well. But tell me a bit more about Douglas, because many of our listeners today will be UK based and maybe not familiar with Douglas, which is European based.
Yeah, and I mean it's I would say comparable to Sephora, maybe in terms of products and how luxury expensive it is. A little bit more towards the medium market, but Douglas on its own started in Germany, expanded throughout different countries within Europe, and especially in mainland Europe is one of those household names where around holiday season everyone starts to get things for their mother or wife or whatever. So it's really one of those physical retail stores that also towards that marketplace model have become a central place to shop for these kind of beauty products.
And talking about the gifting market, we are coming up to Q4, so a good time to look at channels to sell on. Yeah. But we've got a lot to get through, so this might seem a bit rushed, but we will look at a few of these marketplaces in more detail in a minute. But let's just look at sort of domestic appliances, and also that kind of covers a lot of the refurbished marketplaces as well. What's happening in that sector? Who are the standout players?
Yeah. I mean, especially just like you said, we see that from a refurbished perspective. It's not just the phone resellers who are currently doing refurbished, but the domestic appliances brands are doing a lot there. So next to the channels that they're selling the regular products on, from Conrad to Media Market, for instance, but also, towards the refurbished part, Amazon Renewed program, of course, exists. But next to that, we see Back Market and Refurbed being large players in this space and taking a lot of focus on that part as well, which I think is great. And next to that, of course, eBay with the refurbished program, very, very well known. Yeah.
Yeah, and even Amazon's got a renewed and a warehouse program, so it's the whole sustainability story is becoming huge. But one of the biggest categories has always been sort of the home and garden DIY sector. Who are making moves both at home and overseas in this sector?
Yeah, and home, of course, especially with the traction in the past, let's say, year or so, B&Q with the DIY.com has been, has taken a large part of the DIY and the home garden sector. On a larger scale, more international, we see that Mano Mano, especially with the Mano Mano Pro side, is taking on a lot of that business to expand internationally, which is great. Brico has been working on getting their different platforms and their different country formulas into a marketplace model as well. We see it with the Brico stores across Europe, but also with Praxis, for instance, here in the Netherlands. But there's a couple of those. Home and garden, there's a lot of domestic marketplaces that can also sell these kind of items on, right? But maybe I'm also jumping the gun now.
Yeah, and I think I'd just like to point out, I find it so interesting that we've got some more traditional marketplace players, like you mentioned Mano Mano and Mano Mano Pro, which is their trade person business offering, and then you've got B&Q, which is a traditional retailer. And I remember when they launched, within 6 months, 60% of every online sale was from a marketplace seller. And within a year, it had got up to 27%. So almost 1 in 3 products sold on B&Q online now is from a marketplace seller. So there's some real power behind these marketplaces. But we shouldn't forget, obviously, a lot of people in the UK will sell on eBay and Amazon because they're kind of the general marketplaces that cover every category, from the fashion, the beauty, the home and garden, the domestic appliances, the refurbs. When we look at Europe and look for expansion, people are probably eBay and Amazon first for Europe, but what other sort of generalist marketplaces are that you can sell almost anything on that are notable that we should be aware of?
Yeah, of course, there are a couple, and like you said, Amazon, eBay are large in a lot of countries. Although eBay doesn't have the same name across all the different countries, right? So what kind of products are sold there, etc. We do see a lot of local heroes in the mainland Europe space, right? In Poland, we have Allegro. Here in the Netherlands, there's Bol.com, of course. In France, there's Cdiscount. Kaufland being one of them in Germany. So there's a lot of those, let's say the local heroes are taking up a large space of the market. Yeah.
So there's a lot going on. Let's look at coming back to the domestic UK marketplace. Assuming that people are already taking care of Amazon and eBay, what are the other up-and-coming marketplaces that retailers and brands should be considering to attack the UK domestic marketplace from the 50 new marketplaces, Eva?
Yeah, even though there are a lot, right? Yeah. Of course, there are a couple that that really stand out. On the one hand, we see that, for instance, Wayfair has proven to be a very dominant player, especially, of course, in their own home deco kind of category. A lot of different changes that they've made to the API, have improved the quality of the platform for resellers. So I think that's a very, very good step. And of course, we see the same with Wish, right? In their rebranding from last year and everything that they're doing in being a bit more selective to putting the right products on the platform. That's just making that a very good platform to start off with, and then grow that into to real business.
And I think it's worth focusing on Wish and acknowledging that they used to have a lot of Chinese sellers with relatively low priced products on the platform. But as you say, in the last year, they've been actively looking for UK sellers to sell to UK consumers with higher price point, better quality goods. Yeah. So Wish is definitely making moves in the domestic market here in the UK.
Yeah.
But what other platforms should we be looking at out there? Are there any other names that are coming up?
Yeah, and especially, like you said, for platforms that are looking to treat their sellers well, right? That OnBuy is one that cannot be missed there.
Of course.
Being able to have some sort of seller first focus, which benefits everyone in that let's say the whole supply chain towards buyers. But we see the same with Frugo, for instance. There are platforms that you can sell on relatively quickly, right? It's not difficult to get your products on there, right? And you'll be able to grab a lot of the market. And we see that they have a large reach on its own. So it's great to, like I said, for Wish, for Frugo, for OnBuy, to work with these kind of marketplaces, to get the lion's share of attention, right? The eyeballs in your audience.
So I know we've kind of rushed through these marketplaces, and if you're watching this thinking, gosh, I've been scribbling down, obviously you'll be able to watch this again. But more importantly, we're going to put this link up for you to download the 50 new marketplaces you should be aware of ebook. So you'll be able to review all of these marketplaces one by one if we've tweaked your interest. But I'd like to move on now to specifically talk about retailers that have morphed into a marketplace. And we've mentioned some already. We mentioned B&Q, for example, big DIY store. Most people probably visited in the past. A lot of people in lockdown would have used their website, but it's now a marketplace. Which other kind of UK retailers are now becoming marketplaces? And are there any that you'd especially highlight as being particular of interest?
Yeah, I think that for especially in combination with the categories that the verticals we mentioned before, the range is incredibly interesting from this regard. We see that there's a lot of potential, and that they understand the game, being a retailer-led marketplace. The same goes for Debenhams, for instance. I was actually speaking to a couple of people of the Debenhams team last month, and they've expressed interest in any vertical that actually has solid products, good brands, which I think is great, right? There's really a growth mindset towards that platform that I really like. We see the same thing happening, for instance, with Boots, which, of course, we also touched upon really briefly. And not to forget Superdrug, I would say.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting, especially Debenhams, because they were the sort of the stalwart of the high street for 100, 200 years. and got into trouble, but have now been rescued, and they're now known as the UK's probably biggest online department store.
Yeah.
So they're big on fashion, but not just fashion, home and garden, sports. They're opening all sorts of categories. And I know retailers that joined sort of in this sort of time last year had a really good Q4 with their Black Friday Blue Cross sales and everything. Although it's not in store anymore, it's still a very vibrant marketplace online. And obviously, a lot of these marketplaces are actually all powered by Miracle, which that must make it easier to onboard the marketplaces once you've joined one Miracle marketplace to join the others. Could you just touch on that a little bit?
Yeah, and you're right. There's a large part of those marketplaces that are popping up suddenly. They're mostly on that Miracle platform because the framework is one that is very alike for different marketplaces, and therefore the integration is also relatively easy. And not just for us, right? From a ChannelEngine perspective, we'll be able to add a new Miracle integration in a few hours, literally. So if there's a new marketplace popping up, we can actually guarantee if the marketplace cooperates that we have merchants live as soon as the marketplace is live. But at the same time, because we can be so fresh on that new marketplace, the ratio between the visitors, the monthly visitors on a platform, and the sellers is super favorable, right, for the sellers. Where on the existing marketplaces that have been around for a very long time, there might be fairly high competitiveness between the different sellers, different merchants on these new marketplaces where maybe 20, 30 million visitors come per month. There might be very limited number of sellers still, so that the ratio between buyers and sellers is very favorable. It's one you should grab, I would say, from my opinion.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons that retailers that have jumped in early on these retailer-led marketplaces have done really well, because there is that limited competition, but massive audience. I mean, B&Q, one of the biggest retailers in the country, and the same with Debenhams, a massive retailer. Yeah. And I think it's great that if someone, for instance, already sells on, say, Secret Sales, which is a Miracle marketplace, as you say, it makes it very easy for them to launch on Debenhams or Boots or Superdrug or DIY.com, or they're all using the same platform. So once you've integrated one, it really does open up the door to a whole host of opportunities. And they're just the UK retailer marketplaces. There's a whole load more in Europe and around the world.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
But I think what I'd like to do now, though, Dex, if you don't mind, is ask you, can you give me an example of a retailer that has looked at multiple marketplaces that you'll find in our 50 New Marketplaces ebook, and kind of really embraced it? And obviously, they've probably not adopted all 50 marketplaces, but someone that's adopted multiples. Can you give me an example and talk about what difference it's made to their business, and why you would want to suddenly add sort of 2, 3, 4 new channels to market?
Yeah, definitely. We have a case study that speaks for itself, if I may say that. We've been working with Graham & Brown for I think 3 years now, on how to penetrate different marketplaces within the entire space, where we do see from a thought process, which is very interesting, that they're not actually doing a spray and pray kind of approach for all their products on all marketplaces regardless, but they're really looking diligently at how to grow on these marketplaces. So on the one hand, they're looking at what is the right customer fit, where do we find those customers, what kind of products fit towards those customers, right? So not the entire range will be published immediately. And adding those channels then brings some sort of diversification. So at the same time that they're not dependent on a single platform, they're also not dependent on a single type of customer that might be very trend sensitive or might be looking into different areas every season. And then at the same time managing 5, 10 different channels also, of course, requires a lot of work. So that automation piece there, that really makes that really allowed them to grow in that fashion. I think last year, if I'm not mistaken, Graham and Brown did 100% more revenue on marketplaces than the year before. This year they're also uptrending. I think 71% already so far.
This is massive, then.
Yeah, which is crazy because you see, and especially compared to the market, that it's not always easy to have this kind of approach, because if you're if you take a lot of your share from eBay sales, for instance, and there's someone who's undercutting you with similar products or whatever, there might be risk in that single marketplace approach, right? So having that growth and working with all those different platforms with the right focus, I would say that shows that that they can actually have a very sustainable, long-term sustainable business. Understanding that a customer on B&Q is very different from one on Wayfair, and that the needs and the taste of a customer there is very different from an Amazon buyer, for instance.
Yeah. So the numbers are staggering. They grew 100% marketplaces of business last year, and they're already 70% up this year. So that's 70% of 200% growth. So that's like, if you talk about before they started, they grew 100%. Now they've actually grown another 140% on their original business. So what type of retailer are they? Tell me again, what do they actually sell? And which marketplaces have they adopted, and have they all performed successfully, or has there been some marketplaces that have been a real outstanding performer compared to others?
Yeah, they have been actually growing a lot indeed. And there's a couple of marketplaces that have worked very well for them, not just in the UK, right? So they've been looking at also expanding in Leroy Merlin, for instance, in France largely. They're also working on these different local heroes that we touched upon when you talk about bol.com, for instance, but mainly in the UK. Large part of the business is Wayfair driven. Large part is really about Amazon or B&Q, but really being able to showcase those different products there.
Give us an example of what products they might put on Wayfair compared to B&Q, compared to Amazon.
Yeah, I think what's good to note, and I won't give away their entire business strategy, right? That's not really the case. But since they're selling a lot of decor, like wallpaper and on the luxury, on the high end, there are different types of products that they know work well with different audiences, right? So it can be.
So Wayfair might be the high end, B&Q the middle end, Amazon might be the more cost effective products where there's more competition.
Yeah, definitely. And then also on how they portray these different types of items on these different marketplaces makes a very large difference for them, right? They really need to be competitive when it comes to content, showcasing the right attributes, really do a side-by-side comparison. And these are the things where also on Amazon perspective, there's a lot of new opportunities when it comes to pushing content, richer content. But mainly, like you said, on Wayfair, more on the high end, being able to showcase, how this looks in different types of houses, how this would look in different types of environments. And I think that's great. Yeah.
So I think there's a question that's just begging to be asked. We've got this ebook with 50 new marketplaces that you should be considering in it. No one's going to adopt 50 marketplaces this year. They might adopt 2, 3, 4, maybe even 5, but 50, it's not going to happen. What advice have you got for a brand on how to narrow down which marketplaces are going to be the most effective, and get basically which are going to generate the most revenue, and or perhaps not even the most revenue, which are going to generate the most profit for a business? When I've got the ebook, how do I start narrowing it down for what I should be looking at?
Yeah, so my advice would be to fully focus on the niche, right? You focus on the marketplace that is also focused on your category, that has a form of attachment or passion for their sellers, for what they sell on the platform, which, from our perspective, we have a lot of close ties with different marketplaces, and we know the difference, right? We see the difference between a platform that's willing to invest in their sellers, that's willing to think along, do some kind of different types of offerings or promotions whenever that's the right timing. Like, these are the things that I would look at. But from a profitability perspective, you would see the same, right? When it comes to what kind of commissions are you paying, what does the shipping look like, what kind of return percentages are on that particular platform. So it takes a bit of research, but I would say, and this is with my ChannelEngine hat on, right? I would say that it really makes sense to start looking at how to set up an infrastructure from an IT perspective, where you have the flexibility, where you can actually move towards a platform and say, hey, I just want to try this out. We start with 10, 20, 50 SKUs. We watch how the customers respond to it, what kind of preference they have, and then we make a thorough profit and loss analysis. We want to know, bottom line, what we actually have on a lifetime value from a customer. Are there repeat purchases? What kind of returns do we get? Like I said, what is the actual marketing spend? So making that P&L is incredibly important. And we also see that, right? So if a seller is starting right now, they would be in time for holiday season. I would say Black Friday is already closed, but the Christmas part's in definitely very doable with the right assortment. But the first part is making sure that you understand from a marketplace, either with their insights or through your own research, what kind of products would work well there and what kind of profit you would have. Because if you know that the first order is profitable, then every order after that as well.
Yeah, great. Now, one thing I should maybe have asked you this at the beginning, Dex, but I want to thank you for sharing your expertise today, but also thank you for sponsoring the 50 New Marketplaces ebook. But I just want to ask, for those people that don't know ChannelEngine, and why did you sponsor the ebook, and what do you do? How can you help people be successful on these marketplaces?
Yeah, I think it is a great question indeed. So at ChannelEngine, we actually connect brands to marketplaces, right? So we make sure that we have the tech part in place. So with a single connection towards ChannelEngine, we have all the connections built towards 700 marketplaces globally. The 50 New Marketplaces ebook really comes into place because we are actually encouraging a lot of the brands to look where they want to expand and how can they expand there quickest. Just to mention, a large part of what we do on a technical side is about giving control to the brands and retailers that want to sell on marketplaces, right? So they'll be able to manage prices, content, their stock synchronization in real time, all from that single platform. They can do it themselves. They don't necessarily need us, but we're there for help. And there's a lot of features that would increase that profitability, such as making virtual bundles supported by generative AI, and being able to use price rules, repricers, and this kind of stuff.
And it goes without saying that all of the marketplaces we've mentioned today, if you need help integrating with them, ChannelEngine support all of the ones we've talked about. But there's 50 in the ebook, and we know you're still going to want some help and advice. So bring it up on the screen now. We're going to have a URL where you can straight away go down and download the 50 New Marketplaces You Should Be Aware of ebook. But we'll also put a URL up. If you want to speak to ChannelEngine and find out more about them, then follow the link to ChannelEngine. And Dex, if someone gets in touch with you, what can they expect from you? Can they just ring you and talk about the marketplaces they sell on and get some advice from where they have to sell, or do they have to sign up for ChannelEngine software first?
No, we definitely have the strategy to make sure that everything can be in place before moving forward. So I'm not saying we give free advice everywhere, but there's a large part of the basics that we do want to have covered also before starting. But definitely get in touch. We can take a look at where you're currently standing. We can already make some introductions wherever that's necessary to the marketplaces that you have, and especially what we see within the UK is there's a lot of questions on, okay, I have actually asserted dominance in the UK, but I want to move to the US or mainland Europe. How do I do this? And then we can also refer to our partner network where, for instance, third-party logistics providers are there, or importers of record or merchants of record, and local agency teams that can help actually jumpstart a new region. So that could be a first phase without any contractual stuff.
And I think it's worth pointing out that obviously you're in the Netherlands today and I'm in the UK, and you do operate in the UK as well as the EU, as well as the sort of the Americas, and also APAC. You operate on marketplaces around the world. So if someone's serious about expanding, and maybe they've got a goal, not all 50 marketplaces, but maybe they want to be on 5, 10, 15, 20 marketplaces across the UK, Europe, America. You've got the capability to help on all of those territories.
Yes, everywhere globally, with offices ranging from Dublin to New York, Toronto, Melbourne, Singapore, and Dubai. So we really are in that global presence, but also, like I said, with those local partner teams everywhere. So we just have the option for everyone to be supported. Also, if they want to move towards the Asia Pacific region or the American region, for instance.
Great. I want to thank you for your time today, Dex. But before I let you go, I've got one final question, which is, where do you see the future of the sort of marketplace business going? Do you see more of the kind of generalist marketplaces, the eBays, the Amazons, the OnBuys? Is it going to be retailer-led marketplaces? Is it going to be specialty niche marketplaces like secret sales for off-price fashion? That's a very tight niche. Where do you see the big excitement for the next couple of years being?
Yeah, a large part of the business from a brand or retailer perspective is about being there where consumers buy, right? So it's consumer-centric distribution. And we do see that a large part of this is retailer-driven with the niches that you also said. But at the same time, the social commerce part can, of course, not be forgotten, right? We do see that with TikTok Shop actually becoming so dominant that the normal search engine and everything is reverting towards the TikTok Shop as well, and we have the same kind of insights from the larger social platforms that we all know. This is where everything in every touch point in a consumer's life will actually have some kind of conversion there. There's some kind of purchase point for them. And like I said, whether that's from a retailer, whether that's from a social commerce, whether that's from in-car or metaverse even, these kind of things, they're all designed just to make it easier. So if we're looking at the future or making it a bit of a juicy story, it could be everywhere, anytime.
Yeah, and I think that to kind of sum up what you just said in a nutshell, it's all about where consumers start their search. Yep. And so many will start their search on the traditional eBay and Amazon and the big marketplaces, whichever is their favorite. Others nowadays will start their search on a retailer's website, and that's why the retailer marketplaces are doing so well, because they've got hundreds of thousands, millions of consumers on their websites every month already. And I also think it's worth pointing out that some of these marketplaces, like if I just speak B&Q, for example, we all know that B&Q is great for sort of tools and DIY and gardening and wallpaper and kitchen cabinets. But nowadays, you can buy an air fryer, a kettle, or a toaster on B&Q. They're actually opening up new categories. They've got camping goods. They've even got some motor accessories appearing on their site now, all from retailers. So they really are spreading the categories. So just because you don't operate in the sort of that tight DIY niche doesn't mean that B&Q won't welcome you with open arms. And the same with Boots and Superdrug and Debenhams, they're all expanding rapidly. So I think there's huge opportunities there. So I just, once again, Dex, thank you so much for your time today. And I just want to remind people, If you'd like to speak to ChannelEngine to find out more, follow the link below this video, and we'll also put the link there so that you can immediately today download the 50 new marketplaces you should be aware of ebook and start continuing your journey to explore these marketplaces in more detail. So thanks for your time so much, Dex.
Thank you, Chris.
Please go and follow the links.